members first. Maybe have wine and cheese for breakfast. How's that? Our speaker this morning is Martin Barnes. He's the chief economist of BCA Research. He's also one of our... I'm sorry. Martin Barnes, who's chief economist of BCA Research. He's also one of our Pelican Bay Coffee Group members living in the St. Nicole part-time. BCA Research is in Montreal. It's one of the world's leading independent providers of global financial research and information. Martin received his economics degree from the University of Smithclyde in Glasgow, and he moved from Scotland to Canada in 1987 when he joined BCA. His analysis of economic and financial outlook is widely followed around the world, and he is known for providing leading-edge research on a broad issue of matters. This is a return engagement to Men's Coffee, for Martin spoke to us about a year ago on U.S. fiscal policy. Some of you may remember, and that's why some of you may be here. Today his topic is the troubling economic and geopolitical implications of business trends. Well, join me in welcoming Martin.
Thank you, Henry, and good morning. It's a great pleasure to be speaking to this very august group. At Men's Coffee last night, a couple of people said, why didn't you come up with a shorter title? I actually did have a two-word title, so we're screwed. And I didn't think the organisers would appreciate that. That wouldn't have actually been right anyway. Our children and grandchildren are screwed. See why? You know, I've been in the economic and financial market forecasting business for more than 45 years. And the one unfortunate thing I have learned over that period is that the future is unforecastable. It may raise the issue what the hell I've been doing for the last 45 years, but I won't go there. You know, the problem is, if you look at the economy and the markets, just too many moving parts. You know, stuff happens, so you give it your best shot, but your forecast can be wrong. And it explains why the vast majority of economists, and this would include the Federal Reserve, failed to forecast any of the recessions in the last 60 years. So I say this just to caution you that if you take comfort from the fact that you read in the papers that most economists don't see a recession anytime soon, you might want to take that as a warning sign along the lines of this cartoon. Anyway, so rather than talk to you about the economy and the markets, because I'll be wrong, I thought I would talk to you about demographics, which is a little bit more predictable. Why is it predictable? Because most of the people that we're talking about are already here. If I want to know how many 70-year-olds there'll be in 10 years' time, pretty easy. Just count how many 60-year-olds there are today. I'll kill a few of them off. And that's a pretty good guesstimate of how many 70-year-olds will be in 10 years. So demographics can have really powerful effects on economies, societies over time. But year to year, it's incremental. You know, too many other things affect economies. I kind of liken demographics to a glacier. You know, stand at the edge of a glacier and try and watch it move, you'll get bored real fast. But over long geological time spans, glaciers cover huge distances and completely change the landscape. I think demographics is a bit like that, on smaller time scales, generational time scales. So they do matter. And the trends I'm talking about have actually been going on for quite some time. So we actually are starting to see some of the effects of them. So when you raise the issue of demographics, most people typically, certainly in the past, and even perhaps today, think of overpopulation. There's just too many bloody people around. You know, that's putting pressure on the environment, the planet. And this is not a new concern. In 1798, a little while ago, Thomas Malthus published a very famous essay called The Principles of Population. And he predicted that because populations grow geometrically and food production only grows arithmetically, eventually the population would outstrip the food supply and it would be a disaster. Of course, what he missed completely was a revolution in agricultural techniques that allowed food production to expand in line with the population. So he was wrong. More recently, in 1972, a very famous group of global experts called the Club of Rome published a study called The Limits to Growth, 1972. And they had a similar kind of thing, you know, that the rising populations would basically exhaust the resources of the planet. And again, they, I think, underestimated the ability of technology to overcome that problem. But climate change, deforestation, etc. I mean, that debate is still open. Some people would still argue that there's too many people in the world and the planet can't sustain. I'm not going to get into that debate. I'm going to talk about three other specific issues. I mean, demographics is such a huge topic. I could talk about lots of different things, but there's three things I want to focus on. One, not too many people, but not enough people. Declining working age populations in the developed world. Then aging in the developed world, something we are all uncomfortably familiar with. And then the third thing is continued rapid population growth in some of the world's dodgiest countries. Now, a lot of the data I'm going to show you is based on United Nations data. They have a great population database. They do projections. And by the way, I'm going to show lots of slides. Anybody who wants a copy of these, I'd be happy to provide that at the end of the show. You can come up to me and we'll sort that out. Anyway, so on the left here, that's the UN's projection of the global population. It was, you know, back in 1950, 2.5 billion. It's currently 7.5 billion, and they're projecting it will be close to 10 billion by 2050, which seems a long way away. Most of us won't be here, but you know, the years go by real fast. 2050 is kind of baked in the cake at this point. So the population's going up, even as you can see on the right, the growth rate of the population actually peaked in 1970. So the population is growing at a slower and slower rate. It used to grow at almost around 2% a year, and it's down to approaching 0.5% a year by 2050. And it's a wonder of statistics. Back in, I guess, 1950, 1% of the population was, you know, 3 million people. Now 1% of the population is 7.5 million people. So even though the percentages are falling, the numbers keep going up. But here is the really important point. All the growth in the world's population going forward is going to be in the developing world. So you can see that in this chart. So the black line is just the level of population starting in 1950, going up to 2050. The black line is the world's population. This is an index, 1950 equals 100. The red line is the developing world, Africa, Middle East, Asia. And the blue line is the developed world, North America, Europe, Japan, Australia. So we are around about here. So we are flatlining. The developed world's population will not grow at all, you know, over the next 30 years. The developing world will keep growing like crazy. So back in 1950, the developed world, the rich countries, they were about 1/3 of the world's population. Now, we're 17%, and by 2050, we're going to be 13%. So the developing country share of the world is, you know, over 85%. And you've got to believe that economic and political power has some relationship to population. So I'm not saying the developed world's going to become irrelevant, but you know, we've got to expect that more and more things that are important are going to relate to what's happening in the developing world rather than here. So what's going on here with this blue line? Why is it stagnating like this? Well, it's kind of simple arithmetic, really. Population growth in a country or a region is a function of three very simple things. The number of people being born, the number of people dying, and net migration. So if there's more people being born than dying, your population's going to grow. And migration can either add or subtract to that. So what's been happening in the developed world, principally, is that people are not having enough kids. So after World War II, all the sex-starved GI soldiers returned from war and were very happy to see their wives again and showed it in their obvious way. So the baby boom generation was born. So, important statistic. To have a stable population, every woman needs to have on average 2.1 children. So there's two people, a man and a woman, but they need 2.1. Where's the point? Why 0.1? Why do you need this extra 0.1? To take account of infant mortality and the fact that slightly more males than females are born. So, after the war, the birth rate in the US, Canada, it was around 3, a bit over 3. So, way more kids being born than was needed for a stable population. But now, it's collapsed. Canada 1.6, West Europe 1.7, Japan 1.4. So not enough kids are being born. The US used to be the best of the lot. It actually had a 2.1 birth rate for a long time, but it's now dropped below that critical level. So here's the underlying data to this. So the black line, suitably black, because that's the number of people dying. The blue line is the number of births, and the red line is the gap. And these are expressed in terms of percentage of the population. So in the developed world, within the next 10 years, there'll be fewer births than deaths. But because there's fewer births than deaths, this red line that's falling below the 0 line here shows that the natural growth of the population will go negative. So absent migration, populations are going to fall in the developed world. So that gap there, means this red line is below the 0 line. You might wonder why the death rate, the number of people dying, is going up, given that life expectancy is rising. It's true that people are living longer, but just more and more old people to die. You know, the US actually, the US doesn't look so terrible. It's got the same trend, but you don't cross over. There's still more births than deaths in the US, even out to 2050, but the gap is closing. So this red line is slowing sharply. So that your natural increase of your population is shrinking. And of course, there's some ethnic differences in, explaining this, that your non-white birth rate is a lot higher. If you showed this by race, it would look a little bit different. I don't want to get into that. So this is the US here. So this is your natural increase. This is that red line. This time it's blue. This is your total population growth, black. So US population used to grow at 1.7% a year, and now it's falling to, what's that, below 0.4. This is net migration. This is actually only legal migration, I think, this data. But you can see that migration, just legal migration, becomes more important to your population growth than your natural increase. So if you didn't have any migration at all, your total population would be growing even less. So you need migration for your population to grow. So this leads into my first topic, shrinking growth in the working age populations in a developed world. So, turning to geeky economics a bit here. So the ability of an economy to grow depends really simply on two things, over time. Two things, the number of people working and how productive they are. So if the number of people working grows at 1% a year, and productivity is 1% a year, add those two numbers together, 2% a year. That is your economy's kind of natural speed limit. They can grow faster than that for a little while if you cut taxes or oil prices collapse, or it might grow slower than that if you're in a recession. But I don't know what a right analogy would be. Think of it as a car, maybe with the number of cylinders in the car might be the population, and how much gas you put in might be productivity. So you start taking away cylinders, your population growth slows, your car speed limit is going to slow down. So this chart here shows the growth in the working age population. That's people typically defined as 15 to 64. So in the US, it used to grow at 1.5, and now it's growing less than a half. So you've taken away a cylinder. You've taken away 1% a year of your US economy's growth rate just by the fact that you've got slower growth in the number of people working. Europe and Japan are way worse. So this is a zero line here. Europe is now declining. Every year they've got fewer people old enough to work. In Japan, it's really bad. They're deeply negative. So the speed limit of the Japanese and the US and European economies has shrunk dramatically. And productivity has not increased to offset that. So all the economies in the developed world are capable of growing much slower today than they used to be, largely because there's fewer people working. I should have mentioned before, I didn't mention, why by the way, has birth rate fallen? Why are there fewer babies? Birth control and more women having careers would be the two obvious explanations. The developing world in aggregate doesn't have this problem. They're still having lots of kids. Except China is a big exception because of their one-child policy. They've got the same problem as the developed countries, that they've got a shrinking workforce. So Chinese growth is going to be slowing dramatically. Now you could offset this with getting more people working, but in a lot of countries that's already pretty high, like Japan. So the participation rate is what percentage of people of working age are actually in the labour force, either working or want to work. So in Japan, it's up there already, like over 85%. It's hard to get more people into the labour force in Japan. The US is a bit of a mystery. That's the blue line. We used to have 85% of people in the labour force, and it's shrunk dramatically to less than 80, and nobody really knows why. It's kind of bottomed and it's picking up a bit. So it's possible we can get more people back into the labour force. Europe's very, pretty low. So there is scope to get those up a bit, but and this is the female participation rate. It's lower because, of course, women at home raising families, etc. So it's rising in Europe and Japan. Maybe that can help a little bit, but probably not enough. So does this matter? So what if we can't grow as fast? Growth isn't everything. I mean, rich countries there'll be more for a fewer number of people. The problem is we're kind of geared to growth. Modern economies. I mean, how would you like to be a retailer in Japan if your market is shrinking every year? You've got fewer and fewer people every year to buy your products. So slowing growth rates a bit of a challenge in that sense, but it's another problem. We've incurred huge amounts of debt, as you know, in the developed world. Government debt I'm talking here, not private debt. So if you've got fewer and fewer people, that debt burden, shared among fewer and fewer people, so debt per person goes up a lot. So if you look at the US, in 1980, the amount of government debt per, I do this by taxpayer. I assume people of 15 to 20 aren't paying much taxes. So if you take taxpayers as people 20 to 64, I don't mean that people over 64 don't pay taxes, of course they do, but this is the working age taxpayers. There was about $58,000 in today's money, government debt per person. And that's going up to over 100,000 today. That's That's the blue line. Japan is a nightmare. They've gone from like $9,000 debt per taxpayer in Japan to what that is, 170,000 today. So they've got a huge government debt problem looming in Japan because of, they had it even without the demographic, so they'll probably just have to write off their debt. Canada, by the way, where I live, doesn't look so bad. The problem here is that that problem will only get worse as long as governments run budget deficits. So if you run deficits, you're accumulating more debt. I have to say this, but in America, you are running almost $1 trillion fiscal deficits in the midst of an economic expansion, which is something nobody's ever seen before. It's the most irresponsible fiscal policy imaginable. And if AOC's calls for 70% tax rates on the wealthy trouble you, tough cookies if your taxes are going to be going up, I would guess, because your fiscal trends, and I talked about this last year, are unsustainable. So the bottom line of this first topic is the developed world faces an issue of fewer people of working age. It's bearish for the economy, especially when you've got a lot of debt. So this kind of leads into the second topic, aging. So the inevitable combination of rising life expectancy and declining birth rates means rapid aging population. So lots of data here I'm throwing at you, but so again, this is the developed world, US over there. The red line is the number of 65 and over ages, starting with 2,000 equals 100, so it's going to be more than double by 2050. In the US, it goes up even faster. And in the developed world, this is a 20 to 64 age group, from the 0 to 19 there, flat to down. So all the growth in population is coming from oldies. The US looks marginally better. These younger age groups treat a little bit higher, but again, dramatic aging. So, nothing wrong with being old, is there? You guys are all having great fun. Playing golf, tennis, going to coffee mornings, whatever. Actually, I would say the elderly today have a pretty decent time, by and large. And this is why. If you go back to 1970, this is the poverty rate in the US, the green line. The green line is poverty rate for the over 65s, and the red line is the poverty rate for the under 18s. So if you go back to 1970, the poverty rate was really quite high for the elderly compared to the young. But now look what's happened. The poverty rate for the elderly has collapsed, and the poverty rate for the young has actually gone up. So we baby boomers did a phenomenal job of ensuring entitlements went up, and expanding Medicare, expanding Social Security. We looked after ourselves pretty damn well. So we've given ourselves a pretty good life. And you also see this on the right-hand side with real incomes by age. So the green line is real incomes for the 65 plus group. From 1980 it was 100, now it's got up 70% in real terms. And this is all the other age groups of lag behind. So if your kids and grandkids are kind of pissed off with us, you can partly see why. So we're all having a jolly nice time, being elderly financially. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that we're expensive. It's expensive for a country to have more old people for health care and pensions. Data I've seen for the US, I think it refers to 2015, but for those under 44, healthcare costs per year averaged around $2,000 a person per year. For 65 and above, it was up to $11,000 a year. And between 70 and 90, healthcare costs per head double. So we've got a problem of a growing number of expensive old people and a shrinking number of taxpayers to pay for these elderly people. Shouldn't call us elderly. Senior.
Mature.
Mature, that's a better
Oh,
word.
God, that's
So we can look at this by saying, okay, the taxpayers have to pay for us. So let's look at the ratio of the number of people 65 and above divided by the number of taxpayers of working age, 20 to 64. So as you would expect, a dramatic change. So in the US, there was, back in 1970, there was more than 5 taxpayers for every retiree. And that's heading down towards less than 2.5, just over 2. So think of it as a tax-paying couple. 2 people working, pay taxes, are basically carrying the burden of a retiree on their backs. They're paying for that retiree, only 2 of them. Whereas back then, if I Japan was way worse. Japan was, way up here, there was sort of almost 9 taxpayers for a retiree, and now it's shrinking to just over 1. So every Japanese worker is carrying a retiree on their back. What a pain. So our children and our grandchildren, our children are going to have to pay for the burden of us, and our grandchildren are going to have to pay for the burden of our children. Japan is at the leading edge of this. Japan is unbelievable. So the black line shows the number of deaths. Of course, it's black, and the blue line is the number of births. So back in, not that long ago, the early 80s, you can see that there was way more births, twice as many births as deaths. And now it's completely reversed. There's kind of twice as many deaths as births. But this is even more shocking. So the brown line here is the number of people over 80 in millions. And the blue line is the number of people under 4. So again, back in 1990, there were kind of twice as many people under 4 as there were people above 80. And now there's way more people over 80 than there are under 4. That's why in Japan, and you may have heard this statistic, sales of adult diapers far exceed sales of baby diapers. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Ghastly thought. What's the solution here? There's no easy solution here, but I said earlier, people are already here. This is all kind of baked in the cake. But we can get you lot working a bit longer. Retiring at 65 may be a luxury of the past. It's interesting that when they set up pension systems with a 65 retirement age, life expectancy was around, guess what? 65 or less. Less. But if you go back, 1950, life expectancy at birth for a male in all the developed countries was in the 60 to 65 zone. So people being born at that time, and that's me by the way, I was born in 1950, I was not expected to live long enough to get a government pension, or certainly not for years and years. They didn't set up these systems thinking it would be fine to pay people for 30 years on a government pension so they could go and play golf and whatever. Life expectancy rose dramatically. It was in the mid-70s by 2000 and heading towards the mid-80s. This is life expectancy at birth. So the life expectancy went up and they never raised the retirement age. How dumb was that? So it's no wonder that these pension systems are completely bankrupt, effectively. Can't afford the number of elderly people there. They need to raise the retirement age dramatically. It's too late to raise it for you lot, so you're okay, but your kids and grandkids will not be able to come layabouts as early as you could. You could get more old people into the workforce. In Europe, really low. It's less than 10% of 65 plus people are still working. A bit higher elsewhere. US, it's almost 25%. Japan, it's up there. Maybe, yeah, that's going to happen. You read about that all the time, that more people are deferring retirement, maybe for financial reasons, but also, you know, they don't want to play golf every day. So that's partly a solution, but not a complete one. I'm afraid that the only real solution is to change entitlement programs. And again, that's an issue for our kids and grandkids. I'm going to skip over this. This is that's about asset prices. Okay, my third topic, rapid population growth in the rest of the world. By that I mean developing countries, and China being the exception. So birth rates, as I said before, are still far above death rates throughout most of the emerging countries. So they don't have this aging problem. In fact, they've got rapid growth in very young people. The age structure of their populations is totally different. On the one hand, you might think that's positive. Hey, didn't I just say that you need people of working age to grow an economy? So they're going to have lots of people able to work, lots of cylinders in their car. The problem is a lot of these countries are incompetently governed, they're corrupt, and they're just not creating the economic opportunities to allow all these young people to take advantage of them. So you end up with large numbers of young people with no economic future. So they're either want to migrate or they're fodder for extremist groups or whatever. So it's a bit of a concern. So the Institute for, I think it's called the Institute for Peace and Security, they rank over 160 countries in the world about whether they're safe, or how safe they are. How safe they are. The safest country in the world, according to them, is Iceland, followed by New Zealand. Out of 163 countries, by the way, the US ranks, any guesses? 121. Yeah, not good. And it's based on a lot of things like political stability, I guess, crime rates, militarization, whatever. I don't want to get into that. But the 8 most dangerous countries in the world, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, South Sudan, Libya, Democratic Republic of Congo, Afghanistan, they've actually got particularly rapid population growth. That's them. This is other developing countries. So it's kind of unfortunate that you've got the fastest population growth in some of the dodgiest countries in the world. Some of the individual country comparisons are unbelievable. Unbelievable. By 2050, Nigeria is going to have more people than America. So that's what it looked like in 1960. Nigeria was down here, the US was up there, but look at that. It's baked in the cake. It's going to happen. Might not be 100% accurate, but it's broadly accurate. The Democratic Republic of Congo, which is one of the great oxymorons in the world, or something democratic. This is it versus Japan. So Japan was kind of close to 100 million people back in 1960. Democratic Republic of Congo was just over 10. By 2050, it's going to be 80% bigger than Japan. And that's a really nasty country. Afghanistan is going to have more people than Italy. You could go through dozens of these comparisons. Quite incredible. But this is a really big one. This is Africa versus Europe. So again, this is Africa back in 1950, that's Europe. They crossed over in the mid-90s. By 2050, Africa is going to have 3.5 times more people than Europe. Think about that. 3.5 times more people in Africa than in Europe. So if you think there's a migration problem now in Europe, just wait. You ain't seen nothing. Because in most countries in Africa, these people don't have much of a future. So this does bring me to a very thorny topic, dear to the hearts perhaps of some of you, migration, immigration. It kind of would be the logical solution, you would think, wouldn't it? That if there's too many people in the developing world and not enough In the developed world, migration is the obvious equalizing factor here. And that's absolutely right. But as you know, we're seeing a huge backlash around the world against migration. Partly for economic reasons and partly for cultural reasons. On the economic front, people say that you're displacing your locals from the job market, depressing wages. And on the cultural front, it's just that you're losing your culture to foreigners. It's a factor in the Brexit vote, it's clearly a factor in the US election, it's a factor in a lot of European countries. And there's no easy solution to this. The economic argument I find pretty flimsy. In the US, you actually have a shortage of workers. You ask companies what is their biggest problem, it's lack of workers. And in many cases, these immigrants are doing jobs that the locals don't want to do. Yeah, it does depress wages for the unskilled, there's no question. So you've got a choice. You either have unskilled wages under downward pressure from immigrants, or the jobs don't get done. I mean, who does all the landscaping and crop picking in the southern US? I would say it's your immigrant population by and large. But culturally, one can understand the concerns. Partly by 2045, in the US, the non-Hispanic white population, I guess there's some Hispanic white, the non-Hispanic white population will become the minority. I'm sure you've seen that statistic. And that has implications for voting, social reporting, whatever. I don't want to get into that particularly. But my only comment on immigration is that you can't blame people in poor countries from trying to better their lot by moving to countries where they see better opportunities. That's the history of America, Canada, whatever. But you also can't expect these developed countries to open their arms to limitless numbers of these people. So it's a tricky one. It would be nice if conditions in the developing world improved so that they could have better opportunities at home, but good luck with that. Immigration in the US, it's not actually that high. So again, this is percent of the population. This is official US data. I don't know how accurate it is, but the blue line is legal migration, which is just over 0.2% of your population a year. And the illegal is the brown line. It jumps around a lot. It's similar. So you're talking total immigration around 0.5% of your population a year. It's not huge. You kind of need more people to grow, but politically it's creating a firestorm. I don't know the solution to it. So I'm going to stop at this point and just conclude by just pointing out that demographics is an incredibly powerful force. Current and future trends are going to pose serious challenges to our policymakers. And the baby boomers have a lot to answer for. You know, we plundered the planet, destroyed the environment, accumulated lots of debt in the process. And the biggest fault of all, and we could have, the easy part, we didn't have enough bloody kids. Come on guys, you could have done better. You know, if you had more kids, that would have shared the burden, but you didn't, it's too late. So this was a very big picture topic. I'm sure some of you might have preferred I talked about the economy and the markets, and I can always take questions on that if you wish. But our kids and grandkids won't thank us. And here's the issue. And if you want a bottom line in terms of the environment, the economy, and everything else, here's my closing one. It says, while there's no reason yet to panic, it's only prudent that we make preparations to panic. Happy to take your questions.
Okay, Bob. Thanks, Bob. Nice presentation. Do we factor in the growth of productivity, considering automation,
Oh.
AI, robots.
Yeah, I did. I shouldn't have said. That was in my talk. I completely forgot to mention. Yeah. So one of the offsets to having fewer working people is that, well, a lot of jobs are being lost to machines anyway. So isn't it a good thing? Yeah, that's a help. There's no question. We don't know at this stage just how big a factor that's going to be. It's not going to be quite enough. But there is another offset on the other side of that, that an aging population is not going to be a more productive one. Unfortunately, and some of you may dispute this, all the studies I've seen show that there is a correlation between age and productivity. As we get older, we lose cognitive abilities, we're less adaptable to new technologies and new ways of doing things. So if you get more older people into the workforce, that's going to be negative for productivity. Offset by, so we're going to have maybe dumber people and smarter machines. How that all? Maybe it ends up with a Terminator. I don't know.
This issue of immigrants and capability, kind of related to the question you just answered. Part of the problem of the future, I think you described, with technology advancing, is that people who are going to be contributing to society are going to have skills.
Yep.
And I'd like to contrast in that regard. Like, as I understand it, Canadian immigration policy is based to some degree on merit, so as compared to maybe the U.S. policy. Do you have any comments on about that?
Oh, yeah. So Canada does have a merit base. You have to earn points. I mean, they allow some refugees in, but to come as a legal immigrant, they let me in anyway. But I think that's a sensible system. I mean, any country should be allowed to dictate who it lets in. I don't really understand the US system. I mean, you can have a certain percentage of people that you let in for humanitarian reasons, but the bulk of your legal immigrants, I don't see why you wouldn't have a merit-based system. I don't understand your lottery, I think it's bizarre. There is a slight negative aspect to that is that if you just let in the smart people and the qualified people, you're depriving the developing countries of its best and brightest. So you're kind of plundering them. They need these people more than you do. So that's a kind of moral kind of problem. You see that in Africa with a lot of nurses and people that have gone to Britain, and good for Britain because it's got a big supply of nurses, but it deprives countries like Malawi of, they don't have enough nurses anymore because they've all gone to Britain. So immigration is such a tricky one.
Two quick questions. The first question would be, Mike, I'm over here.
Oh yeah, there you are.
The first question would be, isn't it a more important statistic when you just look at debt? Isn't it the percent of debt to GDP that is a more important number? And the second, and I would wonder where the U.S. stands as far as that's concerned. And the second question would be, yes, we don't have enough workers. I agree, and you looked at the demographics, 65 and above, but 18 and below, they're non-productive also. So now when you have a lot of children, you have more entitlements that are needed. You have entitlements that are needed to the elderly, and you have entitlements that are needed to 18 and below, theoretically, because they're not producing anything.
Well, the first one, the debt, yeah, you can look at debt to GDP. You can end up with the same steadily rising trend. Debt to GDP in the US is heading towards 100%. There's no magic number that when a bell rings is that okay, you know. The interesting thing about debt in the US is everybody knows these debt trends. Everybody knows you're running $1 trillion deficits. Everybody knows that debt's going up like this. And the markets don't care. The financial markets are the only policeman out there for a country that's building up its debt. The people aren't going to object because they're benefiting from all the government spending. The politicians aren't going to do anything about it because it's unpopular to cut spending or raise taxes. So at the end of the day, the only people that can force a country to change its fiscal policy are the financial markets. Bond buyers go on strike. And in the US at the moment, the bond buyers don't care. Your 10-year treasury yield is below 3%, markets, there are other things on their mind. But at some point they will. We don't know when that is, but you're not close to a fiscal crisis at the moment, but down the road. In terms of yeah, you can calculate dependency ratios in different ways. You can look at the elderly versus the total, or the elderly plus the young versus the total. Again, you end up with it's the same story, it's the same problem. Demographically, if you don't have enough people in the middle paying the taxes to support the young and the old, you've got an issue. So it doesn't change the story. But yeah, you can look at it in that way.
Yes, great presentation, a lot of useful information, and much of which explains why economics is often called the dismal science. A couple of issues. Much of what you said seems to kind of come down to the old, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. The kind of dismal Malthusian projection 200 years ago, what are the odds now on the world being able to produce enough to support itself and its growth?
Oh, I don't worry about that. You know, I mean, I worry about the environment and all that stuff. Yeah, so we are wrecking the planet. But I guess I have perhaps naive faith in technology to save us from that. Maybe wrong. I mean, there are people who think we're close to a tipping point on the planet where the damage is going to be irreversible. I'm not smart enough to know if that's true or not. But yeah, you could have had somebody come up here and I guess give a completely different talk and warn of the dangers of having too many people, not the lack of them. Yeah.
Can you plug in Russia for 2050 in demographics? And could China be considered a developed country by 2050?
Russia's demographics are absolutely horrible. Their birth rate is incredibly low. Their death rate is quite high because of alcoholism, bad health, etc. So if you think the economic power goes hand in hand with demographics, what you see in terms of number of people, Russia is a problem for sure. Yeah, their demographic. Actually, the whole of East Europe have incredibly low birth rates. Whether that's a side effect of all those years of communism, I don't know, but it's not entirely clear why the birth rates are quite as low as they are in East Europe. But yeah, Russia doesn't look good. In terms of China, will China be a developed country, is what you're asking, 2050? Unlikely, I would think. I mean, there's still, China's, there's two Chinas, I suppose. You go to the coastal regions, I don't know how many of you have been to Shanghai or Beijing, they're incredibly futuristic. It's like something out of a, science fiction movie. It's just incredibly developed and futuristic buildings. And inner China, the rural areas, you're back to the Middle Ages kind of thing. So China in aggregate is still a poor country, it's come a long way. So they've still got an awful lot of development to do. They've accumulated huge amounts of debt in the last decade, and they've got this demographic problem I referred to. So they've got some real challenges ahead of them. They will continue to grow, so they will become more developed, but they won't catch up with America. Not within that time scale. I would be amazed. I mean, in aggregate, their economy will be bigger than America in terms of its total GDP, just because it's 1.4 billion Chinese. So make 1.4 billion people a little bit richer. So the economy grows, but per capita, it will still be way high.
You kind of touched on the fact that it might be an unsolvable problem. I'm not sure I remember the numbers exactly, but recently I remember someone saying that with the 7.5 billion on the planet,
Yeah.
about 5.2, I think it was, billion live on less than $2 a day. And that number goes up by 80 million a year. So
Well, so, no, there's no, I mean, in a perfect world, you would put in place good governments in these countries and improve their economies so you'd be able to employ these people locally in their countries. Good luck getting good governments into Africa. I mean, it seems to go the other way. You can argue it's, you know, it's their problem to solve. It's not our problem. I mean, America is lucky in quotes, that you don't border Africa. And you've got Central America, you're worried about your caravans coming from Guatemala and Honduras, Nicaragua. Imagine if you bordered Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's Europe's problem. It's just a boat ride away from the north coast of Africa. So, yeah, there's no solution, no easy solution to it. I would be surprised if 5.2 billion are living on less than $2 a day. I would see that. That seems a bit unique.
Thank you very much. It was a terrific presentation. I think that if we're looking at this particular problem and you look at this room, we are the people who made this the greatest country in the world. And the reason was that after World War II, we developed one of the best education programs in the world. And everybody, every one of us had good education. We had good educations from the public schools, we had good education from parochial schools, and there were very few private schools.
Question.
And the point is that our schools right now, from K1 to 12, are in terrible shape across the country and really aren't going to be able to educate the children that we have today to do, take on the jobs that we did yesterday. So,
Well,
is there anything
that's a whole separate talk, isn't it? I mean,